Welcome back to the Fiery 49 page. If you watched our previous episode, you know we made an unsuccessful attempt at starting the engine in Fiery 49. That failed due to a lack of spark, but we had a solution. We didn't take the time to diagnose the parts because we had plenty of spare parts sitting around from the 1957 235 we bought to build for the truck that came with everything on it when it was pulled running from a 1957 Chevy. So showed back up a few days later, brought the A-team with me, you see pictured here, and between swapping out the ignition components and a few other things, by the end of the day, we had the truck up and running with very little effort. In addition to the ignition components not working on the truck, the other problem we had in trying to start was the fact we didn't have a key for the truck. There was a key somewhere. When the collection was moved, the key was misplaced, or it's in a pile somewhere, so we just pulled out the entire ignition cylinder, took it to a locksmith, and about an hour later, and for $50, we had a new key made that fits the ignition cylinder and also the glove box and the doors. So took care of that and then moved on to the ignition components. As we've mentioned before, we've already purchased a 1957 model year 235. Slightly better engine design, although in the same parameters, but picked this up really cheaply off of Facebook Marketplace as a running, driving engine. And it came with all the components. We got everything from the carburetor, coils, distributor, alternator, all that stuff. So in addition to getting the core for our engine build, we also had plenty of good usable parts that we could use. So instead of diagnosing components on the truck that weren't working, we could simply swap and drop and move on. So pictured here is the 57 model 235. All the components that we used to get Fiery 49 running came from. And you can see here the parts we quickly pulled to try and get the Fiery 49's original engine up and running. We weren't sure what all problems we would find, so we went ahead and pulled the distributor, the coil, the carburetor. We knew the engine mechanically was sound, so shouldn't have taken much more than this to get the truck running. And as we found out shortly, this was all we needed. And jumping back into the engine bay of Fiery 49, this is the passenger side of the block. This is where the distributor is located in the 235. In this picture, we've already taken the original coil out and the original distributor out. You can see there on this particular model, the engine block has the casting number stamped into it there. Also where the distributor goes in is the larger hole. The smaller hole is just for the retaining bolt for it. Easy to pull out. You take that one bolt out, take a vacuum line off the side for the vacuum advance, and that pulls right out. We did, of course, mark the position, so when we replaced the distributor with the newer model, we put it back in with approximately the same timing the engine already had. And after just a few short minutes, the original distributor and components were out. One screw takes out the clamp for the coil, pulled the coil out, got it out of the way, and then of course we removed the vacuum line and the retaining bolt from the distributor, pulled that straight out. Here we have the original cap wires and stuff separated from the distributor. You can see the condition of those, not that great, not hard to see why we couldn't get spark out of this particular system. Not there's anything necessarily wrong with it, but there is corrosion that needs some diagnosis. And just a real quick up-close look to the end on the inside of one of the plug wires that came off the truck from where it's been sitting. When you've got that amount of corrosion, it's no surprise there was no spark getting to the spark plugs and why the engine wouldn't run. So with all the known good components we had, we simply swapped all that stuff out for the known goods and moved on. We didn't diagnose or try to replace these parts at this time. And here you have a side-by-side comparison of the 49 model year distributor, which is on the left, and the 57 model year on the right. Very, very similar. Some minor differences. If you look close, you can see it. But basically the same distributor, just some upgrades and things that happened as I developed this 235 engine. So very easy swap. One out, one in. Made sure the timing went back in the same with the rotor button pointing at the same direction. And we put it back in and tried things out. And here you can see the 1957 distributor in place. The plug wires are back on. The order is back in. The only thing left to do here is put the coil back in. The coil off of the 57 was actually slightly larger than what was on the 49, so it wouldn't fit in the original retainer. So just to see if things would spark and run, we wired it up to the original wiring and just kind of had it over off on the side laying there. Eventually we wound up moving the hangers and securing the coil once we knew it was going to work. But as you'll see here shortly, very successful. Just a quick 20 minutes worth of work and we had the ignition system up and running. Tell Mommy to crank it over.
Crank it over.
Don't touch it, it'll shock you. Say, yay, we have spark. Yes. All right, crank it. Yay! What is that you're spreading on it? Ether, since I don't have a fuel line hooked up, just enough to let it run. It runs and it sounds good. Yay! And as you saw there, had the spark back. We had not addressed any of the fuel system issues and did not have fuel in the system. We still needed to work and clean the fuel pump. Didn't want to pump gas through the lines until we had checked everything. So just to see if the engine would start, as you saw there, just a little shot of ether down the carb, just enough to see if it would fire and run. Took off enough. Super happy with how things were. So that is all that we really needed. Of course, other things need to be done, like properly setting the timing, ensuring it's in timing, other things. We'll cover that in another video series along with how we progressed from this and into the fuel system. But hope you enjoyed this quick update on getting Fiery 49 up and running through the ignition components. And we'll see you on the next episode.